The crystal chandelier in the Pemberton dining room caught the afternoon light like a disco ball at a funeral. Beautiful, expensive, and completely inappropriate for what was about to go down. Madison Pemberton pushed her organic kale salad around her Wedgwood china plate, blissfully unaware that her life was about to get flipped, turned upside down faster than a Fresh Prince episode. "Madison, darling." Her mother, Victoria Pemberton, began in that tone that usually preceded discussions about charity galas or trust fund adjustments. "Your father and I have some wonderful news." Madison looked up from her phone where she'd been scrolling through her Columbia Law School acceptance letter for the 100th time. The Pemberton patriarch, Charles, cleared his throat and adjusted his Harvard tie, because heaven forbid he wear anything that didn't scream, "I went to an Ivy League school." "Sweetheart," Charles said, setting down his artisanal coffee like he was about to announce the stock market crash of 2025. "We've arranged for you to meet someone very special. The Whitmore family has a son." Hold up," Madison interrupted, her fork clattering against the plate. "Did you just say arranged? Like arranged? Victoria smiled, that smile she usually reserved for photographers at charity events. "It's a wonderful tradition, dear. The Whitmores are old money, Connecticut old money. Their son James just graduated from Yale with honors, and he's absolutely perfect for you." Madison blinked once, twice, then let out a laugh that would have made a hyena jealous. "Are you seriously telling me that in the year of our Lord 2025 you've arranged a marriage for me? What's next? Are we going to negotiate with livestock?" From her chair at the end of the table, Grandma Rose looked up from her soup with gentle concern. At 78, Rose Pemberton was the picture of refined elegance, silver hair perfectly coiffed, pearls gleaming, and eyes that sparkled with warmth and wisdom. "Oh, sweetheart," Rose said softly, setting down her spoon with the careful movements of someone who'd learned that age required patience. "I know this seems overwhelming, but sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected places." "Grandma, this isn't unexpected. This is medieval." Rose reached over and patted Madison's hand with genuine affection. "Your grandfather and I had an arranged introduction, and we had 53 wonderful years together. Not because our parents chose each other, but because we chose to give it a chance." Madison felt some of her anger deflate. Her grandmother had a way of making even the most outrageous situations sound reasonable. "But Grandma, I have plans. Law school, my career. And you'll have all of that, dear," Victoria interjected. "James is very supportive of women's careers. He specifically mentioned how impressed he was with your academic achievements." "He specifically mentioned, wait, what?" Madison's eyes narrowed. "You've already talked to him about me? Without asking me first?" "Well, of course, darling. How else would we know he was interested?" Madison felt her eye start to twitch, a sure sign that her blood pressure was heading toward stroke territory. "I can't believe this. I literally cannot believe this is happening." Charles leaned forward, his expression softening. "Madison, I understand this isn't what you planned. But the Whitmores are good people, and James seems like a genuinely decent young man. All we're asking is that you meet him." "Meet him where? At some formal dinner where we make polite conversation while everyone watches us like we're zoo animals?" "Actually," Victoria said brightly, "they're hosting a casual gathering at the country club this Saturday. Just our families and a few friends." "A few friends," Madison repeated flatly. "The Hendersons, the Ashfords. I think the Vanderbilts might stop by. So basically half of Connecticut. Don't be dramatic, dear." Rose cleared her throat gently. "Madison, honey, would it help if I were there? You know I won't let anyone push you into anything you don't want." Madison looked at her grandmother. Really looked at her. Rose had always been her champion, the one person in the family who understood that Madison needed to forge her own path. If Grandma Rose thought this was worth considering. "You really think I should do this?" Madison asked. "I think," Rose said carefully, "that you should trust your instincts. Meet this young man. See what kind of person he is when he's not trying to impress anyone. And if your gut tells you he's not right, then we'll figure out how to handle your parents." The way she said it, with just a hint of mischief in her eyes, made Madison suspect that her grandmother had contingency plans her parents knew nothing about. Fine, Madison said finally, throwing her napkin on the table with theatrical flair. Fine, I'll meet him, but I'm not promising anything. And if he's some boring trust fund baby who thinks roughing it means flying commercial, I'm out. That's all we ask, sweetheart, Charles said, visibly relieved. Just be yourself, dear, Rose added with a warm smile. I have a feeling everything will work out exactly as it should. Something in her grandmother's tone made Madison pause, but before she could analyze it further, Rose was already standing up. Well, I should let you plan what to wear, Rose said, gathering her things. Madison, wear that blue dress, the one that makes your eyes sparkle. And don't worry about a thing. Sometimes life has the most wonderful surprises in store for us. As her grandmother headed toward the door, Madison called after her. Grandma, what if he doesn't like me? Rose turned back with a smile that seemed to hold secrets. Oh, honey, that's not what you should be worried about. What should I be worried about? Whether you'll like him, Rose said with a gentle laugh. Trust me, dear, that young man has no idea what he's getting himself into. After her grandmother left, Madison sat in the sudden quiet of the dining room, processing the bomb that had just been dropped on her carefully planned life. This James guy, she said finally, what's he actually like? And please don't just tell me he's lovely or accomplished. Charles and Victoria exchanged one of their married couple looks. He's earnest, Victoria said carefully. Earnest, Madison repeated. What does that even mean? He's very genuine, Charles added. Perhaps a bit sheltered. The Whitmores have been protective of him. Madison's lawyer brain kicked in. Sheltered how? He's had internships, jobs, Victoria said quickly. At companies his family owns. Another look between her parents. Some of them, Charles admitted. Madison dropped her head into her hands. Perfect. So I'm meeting a guy who's probably never been told no in his entire life. Madison, you're being unfair, Victoria protested. You haven't even met him yet. True. Maybe he'll surprise me. Maybe he's secretly rebellious and rides motorcycles. Well, Charles said thoughtfully, he does play polo. Madison stared at her father. Dad, polo is literally the most privileged sport on the planet. It requires skill. It requires owning multiple horses, Dad. That's not skill. That's having an obscene amount of money. Victoria sighed. Madison, darling, would it kill you to approach this with an open mind? James really is a catch. Any girl in Greenwich would be thrilled. Then maybe you should ask one of them. That's enough, Charles said firmly but kindly. Madison, I know this isn't what you planned, but sometimes life surprises us in the best ways. Madison looked at her parents, really looked at them. Despite their old-fashioned ideas, they genuinely wanted her to be happy. Okay, she said quietly. I'll go Saturday. I'll meet James. I'll be polite and charming. But I'm not making any promises beyond that. That's all we ask, Victoria said with relief. As Madison headed upstairs, she pulled out her phone and called her best friend Sophie. Mads, please tell me you're calling about going out tonight. My parents arranged a marriage for me. Silence. Sophie, you there? Did you just say your parents arranged a marriage? Like with an actual person? His name is James Whitmore. He went to Yale. He plays polo, and apparently he's earnest. Ernest? Are you living in a Jane Austen novel? Madison flopped onto her bed. I know, right? But here's the thing. My grandmother actually seems okay with it. And you know how she usually is about my parents' social schemes. Your grandmother has excellent judgment about people, though. Remember when she immediately saw through that guy you dated junior year? Tyler. Yeah, she called that one from day one. Madison stared at the ceiling. She said something weird, though. She said James has no idea what he's getting himself into. Maybe she meant because you're stubborn and opinionated. Thanks for the pep talk. I'm just saying, if your grandmother thinks this is worth exploring, maybe it is. When has she ever steered you wrong? After hanging up, Madison couldn't shake the feeling that there were layers to this situation she wasn't seeing yet. Her grandmother's mysterious smile, her parents' careful optimism, the whole thing felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. But Grandma Rose was right about one thing. Madison should trust her instincts. And her instincts were telling her that Saturday was going to be interesting. Outside her window, she could hear the gardener working in the rose beds, and somewhere in the distance, classical music drifted from what she assumed was her grandmother's room. The sound was peaceful, almost hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be a complete disaster. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect Connecticut weather that made Madison wonder if her mother had somehow bribed Mother Nature herself. As she stood in front of her bedroom mirror for the 15th time, adjusting the blue dress her grandmother had recommended, Madison tried to calm her nerves with positive self-talk. "You're just meeting a person," she told her reflection. "A regular human person who probably puts his polo pants on one leg at a time like everyone else." The drive to Fairfield Country Club took exactly 12 minutes of Madison rehearsing conversation starters that didn't sound like job interview questions. As they pulled into the circular drive, she spotted a vintage Rolls-Royce that definitely belonged to her grandmother. Through the club's floor-to-ceiling windows, Madison could see Rose already holding court on the terrace, gesturing animatedly while talking to a tall guy in khakis and a white polo shirt. Even from a distance, Madison had to admit he didn't look like the stuffy trust fund stereotype she'd been expecting. "Is that him?" Madison asked, surprised by the flutter in her stomach. "That's James," Victoria confirmed. "Handsome, isn't he?" Madison watched as her grandmother patted James's arm with what looked like genuine fondness. Whatever they were discussing had James laughing, a real laugh, not the polite chuckle she usually heard at these social gatherings. "He seems normal," Madison said, which was about the highest compliment she could manage for someone she hadn't actually met yet. They walked toward the terrace where the usual suspects had assembled. The Hendersons, the Ashfords, and yes, the Vanderbilts had indeed materialized, because apparently nothing happened in Greenwich without their supervision. "Madison," Rose's voice carried across the terrace like a warm embrace. "Come meet James." As Madison approached, James Whitmore turned toward her, and she felt that flutter again, stronger this time. Up close, he had kind eyes and an easy smile that seemed completely genuine. "Madison," he said, extending his hand. "I'm James. It's really nice to finally meet you." His handshake was confident but not aggressive, and when their eyes met, Madison felt an unexpected spark of connection. "Nice to meet you too," she replied, and meant it. "I was just telling your grandmother about my latest disaster with a golf cart," James said, his cheeks reddening slightly. "Apparently she finds my catastrophes entertaining." Rose laughed with delight. "Oh, sweetheart, everyone has little accidents. It just means you're living life fully." "What happened with the golf cart?" Madison asked, finding herself genuinely curious. "I may have accidentally driven it into the club's fountain last month," James said. "In my defense, there was a bee in the cart, and I have an irrational fear of bees." Madison felt herself smiling. "That's actually kind of endearing. I once destroyed an entire dock because of a wasp." "Really?" "Speedboat plus wasp equals maritime disaster," Madison explained. "The neighbors are still traumatized." James laughed, that same genuine laugh she'd noticed from the window. "It's nice to meet someone else who understands the terror of flying insects." "James, dear," Victoria interrupted, approaching with the Whitmore parents in tow. "We're so glad you could join us today." "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Pemberton," James replied. "Your club is beautiful." "Oh, wait until you see the gardens," Rose said enthusiastically. "Madison gives wonderful tours, don't you, sweetheart?" Madison shot her grandmother a look. "I wouldn't say wonderful." "Nonsense. You know every flower, every tree. It's one of your many talents." Something in Rose's tone made Madison pause, but before she could analyze it, Mrs. Henderson was announcing that lunch was served. The dining area was perfectly arranged with round tables draped in white linens. Madison found herself seated between James and her grandmother, an arrangement that definitely wasn't coincidental. "So James," Madison said, cutting into her grilled salmon, What do you do when you're not playing polo and attending family social events? Actually, James said, looking slightly embarrassed, I'm starting a nonprofit, clean water access in rural communities. Madison paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. Really? I know it probably sounds like typical rich kid guilt, but I spent time in Honduras last year and it really changed my perspective on... He was suddenly interrupted by Rose, who had started coughing violently. Grandma! Madison immediately turned toward her. Are you okay? I'm fine, Rose wheezed, reaching for her water glass. Just a tickle in my throat. But this soup... She gestured at her bowl with a confused expression. It tastes a bit unusual today. James immediately offered her his napkin. Here, Mrs. Pemberton, can I get you anything else? You're so sweet, dear. I think I just need a moment. Rose stood up carefully. I'll be right back. Madison watched her grandmother head toward the ladies' room, moving a bit more quickly than usual for someone who'd just been coughing. Poor thing, Victoria murmured. She's been so excited about today. She seems wonderful, James said sincerely. Very warm and welcoming. She is, Madison agreed. She's actually the one who convinced me to give this whole thing a chance. Really? She has good instincts about people. Always has. 20 minutes later, Rose returned, looking perfectly fine, just as James excused himself to use the restroom. Madison was telling him about her constitutional law professor when they heard what sounded like someone falling downstairs, followed by a tremendous crash. What the... Madison started. Madison language, Victoria chided automatically. A moment later, James appeared in the terrace doorway, absolutely soaking wet, and covered in what appeared to be soup. His polo shirt was dripping, his hair was plastered to his head, and he looked like he'd been through a car wash fully clothed. I am so sorry, he said, trying to wring out his shirt. I have no idea what happened. I was washing my hands and suddenly I felt really unwell, like really unwell, and I was running to find another bathroom, and there was this mop bucket in the hallway that I didn't see. He gestured helplessly at his soaked appearance, pieces of lettuce falling from his shoulder. The whole buffet table just exploded when I crashed into it. I think I may have destroyed the club's lunch service. Madison stared at him. Here was this guy, completely humiliated and covered in food, and he was apologizing to everyone else. Are you hurt? She asked, standing up. Just my dignity, James said ruefully, and possibly my chances of making a good impression. Don't worry about it, Madison heard herself saying. Trust me, this family has seen much worse disasters. Rose nodded sympathetically. Oh, honey, these things happen. Don't give it another thought. A waiter appeared with towels, and James tried to clean himself up while the Whitmore parents looked mortified and started apologizing profusely to everyone within earshot. I should probably go home and change, James said, still dripping. This is not exactly how I imagined today going. Actually, Madison said, surprising herself, would you like to take a walk? Get some fresh air while you dry off? James looked at her with something that might have been gratitude. You'd want to do that, even though I look like I lost a fight with a soup kitchen? Especially because of that, Madison said with a grin. Come on, the gardens are actually pretty nice. As they walked away from the terrace, Madison could hear Rose reassuring the other guests that these things happened all the time. Not to worry, just a little accident. Your grandmother is really sweet, James said as they strolled past the perfectly manicured flower beds. She's been so understanding about, well, everything. She's the best, Madison agreed. Always has been. I have to ask, James said, pausing by a rose bush. On a scale of 1 to 10, how badly am I bombing this whole arranged meeting thing? Madison considered this. Well, you're covered in soup. You've had what sounds like food poisoning, and you basically destroyed the country club's buffet. So, a -5? I was thinking more like an 8. James stopped walking and stared at her. Really? Really? Want to know why? I'm almost afraid to ask. Because despite everything going wrong, and I mean everything, you're still here. You're still trying to get to know me. You haven't once complained or blamed anyone else or made a scene. You're just rolling with it. James's expression softened. Maybe I'm just too stubborn to give up. Or maybe you're exactly the kind of person who can handle whatever life throws at you. They continued walking, and Madison found herself genuinely enjoying James's company. He was funny, self-deprecating, and when she told him about her law school plans, his face lit up with real interest. Environmental law, he said enthusiastically. That ties directly into the work we're trying to do with water access. Have you thought about focusing on water rights? Actually, yes. The cases in California are fascinating. The agricultural disputes, it's this incredible intersection of property law and environmental protection, and indigenous rights, Madison added. Exactly. Most people don't realize how complex. James suddenly doubled over, clutching his stomach. Oh no, he groaned. Not again. I'm so sorry, Madison. This is beyond embarrassing. He rushed toward a cluster of trees, leaving Madison alone by the rose garden. She pulled out her phone and texted Sophie. Update, he's actually really sweet. Also, he has the worst luck I've ever seen. The response came immediately. Food poisoning on a first date? That's rough. Is he handling it okay? Madison glanced toward the trees where James had disappeared. Like a champion, actually. When James returned a few minutes later, looking pale but determined, Madison made a decision. You know what? She said. Let's get out of here. What do you mean? I mean, let's go somewhere normal. Somewhere we can actually talk without you having to worry about. She gestured vaguely. Whatever stomach bug you've picked up. James's face lit up despite his obvious discomfort. You'd want to do that even though I'm clearly having the worst day in human history? Especially because of that? But fair warning, we're taking my car and we're making frequent stops. As they walked back to make their excuses, Rose caught Madison's eye and gave her an encouraging smile. You two have fun, she said warmly. And James, dear, I hope you feel better soon. Sometimes these little setbacks are just life's way of testing us. Madison caught something odd in her grandmother's tone, but James was already thanking Rose for her kindness, and the moment passed. During the drive to a quiet coffee shop, with James directing her to 3 different bathrooms along the way, Madison found herself thinking that maybe arranged meetings weren't completely insane. Maybe, despite his terrible luck today, James Whitmore was exactly the kind of person she'd been hoping to meet, even if he did seem to be having the worst day of his life. I promise I'm not usually this much of a disaster, James said as they finally settled into a corner booth at Been There, Done That. Hey, Madison said, reaching across the table to touch his hand briefly. For what it's worth, you're handling disaster better than most people handle normal days. And as James smiled at her, really smiled, despite everything that had gone wrong, Madison realized that sometimes the best connections happened in the most unexpected circumstances. Even if those circumstances involved food poisoning and public humiliation, she just hoped his luck would improve soon. Madison's BMW had never been used for emergency bathroom runs, but as they cruised down Greenwich Avenue with James directing her to every Starbucks and gas station within a 5-mile radius, she was starting to think this might become a regular feature of their relationship, if they even had a relationship after today's disasters. I am so sorry about this, James said for the 15th time as they pulled into the parking lot of Been There, Done That, a coffee shop that looked mercifully equipped with facilities. I swear I'm not usually this much of a walking catastrophe. Hey, everyone has off days, Madison said, though privately she was starting to wonder if James might have some kind of rare medical condition that made him allergic to social events. Inside the coffee shop, they found a quiet corner booth where James could keep one eye on the bathroom door, just in case. Madison ordered them both coffee and muffins, sticking to bland options that hopefully wouldn't aggravate whatever stomach bug James had picked up. So, Madison said, settling into her seat, tell me about this nonprofit, the real story, not the elevator pitch version. James's face brightened despite his obvious discomfort. You really want to hear about it? I really do. For the next hour, James told her about his trip to Honduras, about meeting the Hernandez family, about walking 4 hours daily with their daughter Maria just to get clean water. His passion was infectious, and Madison found herself leaning forward, completely absorbed in his stories. "That's incredible," she said when he finished explaining their well-building projects. "How many communities are you working with now?" "3 so far, with plans for 5 more next year." Maria starts engineering school in the fall, Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Honduras. She wants to come back and help design sustainable water systems for rural communities. Madison stared at him. This was definitely not the privileged trust fund baby she'd been expecting. "James, that's amazing. Really amazing." "Thanks," he said, then suddenly paled. "Oh no. Excuse me, He rushed toward the bathroom again, leaving Madison alone with her thoughts and a growing concern about his health. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rose. "How are things going, sweetheart?" Madison typed back. "Good conversation, but he's really sick. Should I be worried?" "Oh dear. Probably just something he ate. These things happen. The important thing is how he's handling it. He's being incredibly gracious about the whole thing. That tells you everything you need to know about his character." When James returned, looking embarrassed but determined, Madison had made a decision. "Okay, here's what we're going to do," she said. "I'm driving you home so you can rest and recover. We can continue this conversation when you're feeling human again. You don't have to. I want to. But first, answer me honestly. Do you think you should see a doctor? This seems pretty severe." James shook his head. "I'll be fine. It's probably just something I ate. Bad timing, but these things happen, right?" Madison studied his face. He really did seem to think this was just bad luck. "Right," she said. "Come on, let's get you home." The drive to the Whitmore estate took 20 minutes, with 2 emergency stops that James handled with remarkable good humor, considering the circumstances. As they pulled up the circular driveway of a house that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest, Madison couldn't help but be impressed by James's continued efforts to make conversation despite his obvious distress. "Thank you," he said as they reached the front door. "For understanding, for not running away screaming, for everything. Hey, if you can't handle someone at their worst, you don't deserve them at their best, right?" James smiled, the first genuinely relaxed smile she'd seen from him all day. "Did you just quote Marilyn Monroe at me?" "Maybe. Did it work?" "Definitely." Madison felt that flutter in her chest again. "Feel better, okay? And call me when you're up for round 2 of this whole getting to know you thing." "I will. I promise." As Madison drove home, she found herself smiling despite the day's chaos. Yes, James had spent most of their time together in various states of digestive distress, but she'd also seen glimpses of someone really special. Someone passionate, genuine, and remarkably graceful under pressure. Her phone rang just as she pulled into her own driveway. "How did it go?" Sophie's voice was eager with curiosity. "Well, he spent half the time in bathrooms, destroyed the country club's buffet, and basically had the worst day in human history. And I really like him. Even though he's apparently cursed?" Madison laughed. "Especially because of how he handled being cursed. Sophie, this guy could teach master classes in grace under pressure. So you're seeing him again? If he survives whatever food poisoning he picked up, definitely." That evening, Madison found herself at loose ends. She tried reading, tried watching Netflix, tried organizing her closet, anything to stop replaying the day's events and wondering how James was feeling. Around 9 o'clock, her grandmother appeared in her doorway with 2 cups of tea and a knowing smile. "Room for one more?" Rose asked, settling into Madison's reading chair without waiting for an answer. "How did you know I'd be overthinking everything?" "Because you're my granddaughter, and overthinking is a Pemberton family trait. So tell me about James." Madison curled up on her bed, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "He's not what I expected." "How so?" "He's genuine. Really, truly genuine. And funny, and passionate about his work, and..." Madison paused. Grandma, he had the worst luck today. Like, cosmically bad luck. Food poisoning, accidents, just one disaster after another. But he never complained, never blamed anyone, never lost his temper. He just kept trying to make the best of it. Rose's eyes sparkled with something Madison couldn't quite identify. That says a lot about his character. It really does. I mean, most guys I know would have stormed off after the first bathroom emergency, but James just rolled with it, even made jokes about it. Sounds like exactly the kind of man who could handle being part of this family, Rose said with a gentle laugh. What do you mean? Oh, sweetheart, we Pembertons are not exactly low maintenance. Between your mother's social schedules, your father's business drama, and well, let's call them my eccentricities, we need someone who can adapt to chaos. Madison studied her grandmother's face. You really like him, don't you? I think he has potential, Rose said carefully. But more importantly, I think you like him. I do, Madison admitted. Which is terrifying because this whole arranged thing was supposed to be a disaster that I could laugh about later. Life has a funny way of surprising us, Rose said, standing up. Get some sleep, sweetheart. I have a feeling tomorrow will be very interesting. Something in her grandmother's tone made Madison pause. Why? What's happening tomorrow? Oh, just brunch. Your parents invited the Whitmores over to continue getting acquainted. Nothing special. Rose kissed Madison's forehead and headed toward the door, then paused. Madison? That young man of yours, he's stronger than he looks. Don't worry about him too much. After her grandmother left, Madison lay in bed wondering why Rose's reassurance felt more like a warning, and why did she have the strangest feeling that tomorrow's simple brunch was going to be anything but simple? Her phone buzzed with a text from James. Thank you again for today, feeling much better. Looking forward to tomorrow, assuming I can convince my digestive system to cooperate. Madison typed back, just promise me you'll see a doctor if this keeps happening. I'm starting to worry you're allergic to my family or something. If I am, it's worth the risk. See you tomorrow. Madison smiled and set her phone aside, but sleep was elusive. Something about the day felt orchestrated. The timing of James's illness, the way everything had gone wrong at exactly the wrong moments, even her grandmother's mysterious comments about tomorrow. But that was crazy, right? Who would deliberately sabotage a first meeting? As she finally drifted off to sleep, Madison's last coherent thought was wondering if James's terrible luck would continue, or if tomorrow would finally give them a chance to get to know each other without disasters. Little did she know that tomorrow's disasters would make today look like a minor inconvenience, and that her sweet, innocent grandmother was sleeping peacefully down the hall with a very satisfied smile on her face. Sunday morning arrived with ominous perfection, the kind of beautiful weather that made Madison immediately suspicious, especially given James's track record with social events. As she came downstairs in her favorite sundress, she found her grandmother arranging flowers in the front hall, humming contentedly. Morning, Grandma, Madison said, studying Rose's unusually cheerful demeanor. You're up early. Oh, I've been up for hours, sweetheart, Rose replied, adjusting a particularly large lily. Big day today. I want everything to be perfect for the Whitmores. Something in her grandmother's tone set off Madison's internal alarm bells, but before she could analyze it further, the doorbell rang. James looked incredible in khakis and a light blue button-down, and more importantly, he looked healthy. The color had returned to his face and his smile was genuinely relaxed for the first time since she'd met him. You survived the night, Madison said, greeting him with a smile that felt embarrassingly automatic. Barely, he replied, grinning back, but I'm feeling completely human again. Yesterday was just one of those days, I guess. Well, hopefully today will be better. It already is, James said, and the way he looked at her made Madison's heart do that fluttering thing again. Rose appeared in the doorway like a perfectly dressed angel of hospitality. James, darling, how wonderful to see you looking so much better. Thank you, Mrs. Pemberton. I'm embarrassed about yesterday. Oh, nonsense. These things happen. Now, I thought we'd have brunch out on the terrace. It's such a beautiful day and I'm dying to show you our garden properly. The brunch setup was magazine perfect. White linens, fresh flowers, and enough food to feed Greenwich's entire social register. The Whitmore parents had already arrived and were deep in conversation with Victoria and Charles about something involving municipal bonds. "Madison, sweetie," Rose called, "why don't you give James that garden tour while we finish setting up?" Madison found herself being gently shepherded toward the garden path with James, while Rose's delighted humming followed them into the distance. "Your grandmother really is wonderful," James said as they walked past perfectly manicured hedges. "She's been so kind about yesterday's disasters." "She's always been my favorite person in the world," Madison replied. "She has this way of making everyone feel welcome, no matter what." They were admiring the rose garden when James suddenly disappeared. One moment he was asking about the different varieties of flowers, and the next moment he was gone. Vanished. Like the earth had literally swallowed him whole. "James?" Madison called, looking around frantically. "James, where did you—" "Down here," came his muffled voice from somewhere near her feet. Madison looked down and saw a perfectly camouflaged hole in the ground, about 3 feet deep and just wide enough for one person. James was sitting at the bottom, covered in dirt and looking completely bewildered. "What the heck?" Madison knelt at the edge of the hole. "Are you hurt?" "Just my pride," James said, brushing dirt from his hair. "I have no idea how this happened. I was just walking and suddenly the ground gave way." "That's so weird," Madison said, helping him climb out. "I've lived here my whole life and never seen anything like this." James stood up, dusting off his khakis with remarkable good humor. "Well, at least I'm consistent. If there's a way for something to go wrong, I'll apparently find it." As they walked back toward the terrace, Madison noticed James limping slightly. "Are you sure you're okay?" "Just twisted my ankle a little." "Nothing serious." Rose was waiting for them with a concerned expression. "Goodness. What happened to you, James?" "I fell into a hole in your garden, Mrs. Pemberton. I'm so sorry. I hope I didn't damage anything." "Oh, my stars. A hole? Where?" "Over by the roses," Madison said. "Grandma, do you know anything about construction or landscaping work being done?" Rose looked genuinely puzzled. "Not that I know of." "How strange. We'll have to have the gardening service look into that immediately." "James, dear, are you hurt?" "I'm fine, really. These things seem to happen to me a lot lately." "Well, come inside and get cleaned up. Madison, show him to the powder room." As James limped toward the house, Madison caught her grandmother's eye. "That was really weird, right?" "Very strange, sweetheart. I'll call the landscapers tomorrow." Brunch proceeded normally for exactly 10 minutes. James had changed into a spare shirt that Charles had lent him, and the conversation was pleasant and engaging. Madison was actually starting to relax when Rose stood up. "James, dear, would you mind helping me in the kitchen? I need something from the top shelf and these old bones just can't reach like they used to." Madison felt a prickle of unease. "I can get it, Grandma." "Nonsense. James is so tall and strong. Besides, I want to show him my special jam collection." James, ever the gentleman, immediately stood up. "Of course, Mrs. Pemberton, happy to help." Madison watched them disappear into the house, and exactly 3 minutes later, there was a tremendous crash followed by what sounded like every dish in the kitchen hitting the floor simultaneously. "What in the world?" Victoria started. James appeared in the doorway, absolutely drenched from head to toe, with flour in his hair and what appeared to be maple syrup coating his entire shirt. He looked like he'd been attacked by a breakfast-themed villain. "I'm so sorry," he said, looking mortified beyond belief. "I was reaching for the jam jar, and I accidentally knocked over what I thought was a decorative bowl, but it turned out to be some kind of contraption. And then water came from everywhere and flour, and I think I broke your blender." Rose appeared behind him, looking shocked and dismayed. "Oh, James, how terrible. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, just sticky, and probably banned from your kitchen forever." Madison stared at the scene, her mind racing, a hole in the garden that appeared from nowhere, a mysterious contraption in the kitchen that doused people with water and flour, James's consistent run of impossible bad luck. and her grandmother's perfectly timed suggestions that kept putting James in harm's way. "I need to clean up," James said, looking defeated. "This is getting ridiculous." As he headed back inside, Madison excused herself and followed him, her detective instincts finally kicking into overdrive. She found James in the powder room, trying to wash syrup out of his hair with a hand towel. "James," she said quietly, closing the door behind her. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Though I should warn you, I'm apparently a walking disaster magnet. Have you always been this accident-prone?" James paused in his cleanup efforts. "You know, that's a good question. I mean, I've always been a little clumsy, but nothing like this. These past 2 days have been like something out of a slapstick comedy." Madison felt pieces clicking into place. "What exactly happened yesterday? Walk me through the whole thing." "Well, your grandmother's soup made me incredibly sick. Food poisoning, I guess. Then I slipped on that mop bucket and crashed into the buffet. Today, I fall into a random hole and get attacked by kitchen appliances." James looked at her with growing confusion. "Why?" Madison's mind was racing. Her grandmother's mysterious comments, the perfectly timed accidents, the way Rose kept suggesting activities that put James in vulnerable positions. "James, I need to check something. Wait here." Madison slipped out of the powder room and headed straight for the kitchen. What she found there made her gasp. The kitchen looked like a war zone, but not randomly. There were clear signs of an elaborate setup, pulleys attached to the ceiling, a bucket that had obviously been rigged to tip over, and a bag of flour that couldn't have fallen naturally from any shelf. This wasn't an accident. This was a trap. And there was only one person in the house with both the creativity and the motive to set something like this up. Madison marched back to the terrace where her grandmother was consoling the Whitmore parents about their son's terrible luck. "Grandma," Madison said, her voice carefully controlled. "Can I talk to you privately?" "Of course, sweetheart." They walked to the far end of the terrace, out of earshot from the others. "I know what you did," Madison said quietly. Rose's expression didn't change. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, dear." "The soup yesterday. The hole in the garden. The kitchen trap. All of it." For a long moment they stared at each other. Then slowly, Rose's innocent expression melted into something that looked suspiciously like pride. "You figured it out," she said, not bothering to deny it anymore. "Grandma, how could you? James thinks he's cursed." "James," Rose said firmly, "has passed every single test I've thrown at him with flying colors." "Test? You call giving him explosive diarrhea a test?" "I call seeing how he handles adversity a test. And that young man has handled everything I've dished out with grace, humor, and determination. He's never once complained, never once lost his temper, never once taken his frustrations out on anyone else." Madison stared at her grandmother. "You've been sabotaging him this entire time." "I've been evaluating him. There's a difference. By torture. By challenge. Madison, any man can be charming when everything goes right. I needed to see what kind of person James is when everything goes wrong. And I'll tell you what kind. He's the kind who apologizes for bleeding on your bandages. He's the kind who worries more about your feelings than his own embarrassment. He's the kind who keeps trying to make conversation even when he's having the worst day of his life." Madison felt her anger warring with grudging admiration. "But Grandma..." "But nothing. That boy in there is gold, Madison. Pure gold. And if you let him slip away because you're too proud to admit that sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected circumstances, then you're not half as smart as I raised you to be." Madison looked back toward the house, where James was probably still trying to de-syrup himself in the powder room. "He's going to hate us when he finds out." "Will he?" Rose asked. "Or will he understand that everything I did came from love for you, and a desire to make sure he was worthy of that love?" Madison was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Her grandmother's elaborate schemes, James's consistent grace under pressure, her own growing feelings for someone who'd literally been tested by fire. "Are you going to tell him?" Rose asked quietly. Madison looked at her grandmother. Really looked at her. Rose's eyes were filled with love and hope, and just a tiny bit of mischief that suggested she wasn't entirely sorry for what she'd done. "We're going to tell him," Madison said finally. "Together. Right now." They walked back to the house where they found James in the living room, having given up on the syrup removal project and resigned himself to being sticky. "James," Madison said, taking a deep breath. "We need to talk. If this is about the kitchen, I really am sorry. I have no idea how—" "James," Rose interrupted gently. "Sit down, dear." He sat, looking confused and wary. Madison took the chair across from him. "What I'm about to tell you is going to sound completely insane. More insane than the past 2 days have been? Much more insane." Madison glanced at her grandmother, who nodded encouragingly. "James, you haven't been having bad luck." "I haven't?" "No. You've been tested." James looked from Madison to Rose and back again. "Tested how?" Rose cleared her throat. "James, dear, everything that's happened to you since yesterday, the soup, the hole, the kitchen incident, I arranged all of it." James blinked. "Once, twice. You arranged it?" "Yes. You gave me food poisoning on purpose." "Digestive distress," Rose corrected. "Not actual poisoning. You dug a hole in your garden for me to fall into. A small hole, more of a depression, really. You booby-trapped your kitchen. I prefer creatively rigged." James was quiet for a very long moment. Madison held her breath, waiting for the explosion of anger that would be completely justified. Instead, James started to laugh. Not the polite chuckling she'd heard before. Not nervous giggling. Deep, genuine, uncontrollable laughter that seemed to come from his core. "You've been testing me," he gasped between laughs. "This whole time you've been testing me." "Well," Rose said, looking pleased, "I had to make sure you were good enough for my granddaughter." "By making me think I was the unluckiest person on earth? By seeing what kind of man you are when life kicks you in the teeth?" James looked at Madison, his eyes sparkling with something that might have been admiration. "Did you know?" "I figured it out about 10 minutes ago," Madison admitted. "I'm so sorry, James. I had no idea she was—" "Are you kidding?" James interrupted. "Madison, this is brilliant. Completely insane, but brilliant." Madison stared at him. "You're not angry?" "I'm impressed. Your grandmother just put me through the most elaborate character evaluation in human history, and I apparently passed." Rose beamed. "With flying colors, dear boy." James turned to Rose with something that looked like respect. "So what's the verdict, Mrs. Pemberton? Am I worthy of your granddaughter?" "You are indeed. Anyone who can handle my testing methods with that much grace and humor is definitely Pemberton material." James stood up and walked over to Madison, still sticky with syrup but grinning like he'd just won the lottery. "Madison," he said, "I know this whole arranged marriage thing started as a family obligation, but would you maybe want to try this for real? You know, see where it goes when your grandmother isn't actively trying to destroy my dignity?" Rose held up her hand. "I make no promises about future interference." "Grandma?" Madison protested, but she was fighting back laughter. "Fine, fine. I promise to limit my involvement to meaningful looks and subtle suggestions." Madison looked at James, really looked at him. Here was this incredible man who'd been put through an elaborate gauntlet of humiliation and was still standing there asking her out while covered in breakfast ingredients. "You know what?" she said, standing up to face him. "I would love to see where this goes." "Really?" "Really, but first—" She reached up and tried to remove a piece of flour from his hair. "We really need to get you cleaned up." "Actually," James said, his eyes sparkling with mischief, "I have a better idea. What if we don't clean up? What if we go somewhere public, looking exactly like this, and see what happens? You want to go out covered in syrup? I want to go anywhere with you. Syrup and all." Madison felt her heart do that fluttering thing again, only this time it felt less like nervousness and more like falling hard and fast for someone who could laugh at himself while covered in kitchen ingredients. "Okay," she said, But I'm driving. Deal. As they headed toward the door, Rose called after them. Madison, James. They turned back. Welcome to the family, James, and congratulations on surviving the Pemberton initiation. Thank you, Mrs. Pemberton. Though I have to ask, is the rest of the family this creative? Rose's smile was full of mischief. Oh, honey, you haven't seen anything yet. 3 months later, Madison would look back on this moment as the exact instant she knew she was going to marry James Whitmore. Not because their parents had arranged it, not because it made social sense, but because he was the kind of person who could find out he'd been deliberately sabotaged and still ask her out with maple syrup in his hair. But first, they had a very sticky car ride ahead of them, and Madison was pretty sure this was going to be the best-worst first real date in the history of arranged marriages. So, James said as they walked to her car, on a scale of 1 to 10, how crazy is your family? Madison looked back at the house where her grandmother was visible through the window, already plotting her next scheme. Honestly, she said, you haven't seen anything yet. Bring it on, James grinned. I'm tougher than I look. And as they drove away, with James still picking flour out of his hair and Madison already planning their actual first date, both of them realized that sometimes the best love stories started with the most ridiculous circumstances. Behind them, Rose Pemberton watched from the window and smiled with deep satisfaction. She'd known from the moment she met James Whitmore that he was perfect for her granddaughter. Sometimes, though, young people needed a little push to see what was right in front of them, even if that push involved laxatives, pit traps, and kitchen booby traps. Mission accomplished.